Good evening, everyone. This is DM Gallibond, and tonight it's Monster Monday. Imagine, if you will, the scene where Barlow Muggs comes down to the common room of his inn, the mug and the spoon. And he's getting ready to get the day started and thinking what a relief it is that the earthquakes have ended. The foundation of his inn, at least, is stable. The fires that have raged in the forest have quelled down, and the mudslides just barely missed the town. He's thinking this is going to be the start of a busy season as people come into the town to help rebuild and help to straighten up all of the damage that has happened. And as he's puttering around in the kitchen, getting it ready for the cook, he smells smoke. Not the smoke of a fire, but the fragrant, aromatic smoke of a pipe. And it's coming from the back door of the kitchen. He goes over, wondering who could be sitting outside his doorstep smoking a pipe at this hour of the morning. And he opens it, and his breath catches. Before him is a woman. She seems ageless. Her eyes look like they may have seen 1,000 winters, but her skin looks like that of a woman in her prime and her health. She pulls the stem of the pipe out of her mouth and uses it as a pointer towards the innkeeper. Barleyman, you'll gather the town council. You'll get them here in your common room before breakfast. I have words for them. Barleyman stands straight up. Yes, my lady. And he turns and he starts to walk back into the inn, just leaving the kitchen door open, thinking he's got to race and wake up the town council. The look of her robes frayed from a long journey, and the remnants of a bird's nest on the brim of her hat are all Barlowman needs to realize this is the great druid. And that can only mean one thing. All the problems are somehow the fault of the town. All right, hello everybody. How are you doing? My name is DM Gallibond. Tonight is September 7th, 2020. This is Monster Monday, and as we saw from our opening there, what we are going to be doing tonight is we are going to be looking at the Archdruid. The Archdruid is a monster in 5e D&D, but it has a very curious history as we go back through the different iterations of D&D. So let's go ahead and take a look at our monster for the evening. The Archdruid. Archdruids watch over the natural wonders of their domains. They seldom interact with civilized folk unless there is a great threat to the natural order. An Archdruid typically has one or more pupils who are druids, and the Archdruid's lair is usually guarded by loyal beasts and fey creatures. Now, that's really all they tell you about the Archdruid in 5e D&D, and if you haven't played any previous editions, you wouldn't know a whole lot about it. We're going to peel back a little bit of that as we go through and look at the history of this monster. Now, lore about the monster. Okay, this ties in with the introduction that we had. This is a quote from Barlow and Muggs, the proprietor of the Cask and Spoon. After a natural disaster, when a druid comes to town, it might be cause for celebration. After all, he might be here to let us know about some blight that was responsible for the disruption. But when the Archdruid comes to town after a disaster, you know it's trouble. She's here to tell us what the town did to bring the disaster on ourselves. And if we're lucky, she'll tell us how to keep it from happening again. Such is what the innkeeper thinks, and why he was so horrified to see her on his doorstep that morning. All right, the Archdruid is a humanoid creature, and obviously humanoids are the main peoples of the D&D world, and a druid is a playable class. So any class or any race that can have the class of druid, and in 5e they've gone away from typecasting races into certain classes. Yes, races get certain bonuses that make them more predisposed to playing certain classes that rely on those bonuses, but there is no rule in 5e that just because you're a half orc you cannot be a druid, or you cannot be a paladin or something of that nature. Or just because you're a gnome, you can't be, a fighter. They have gone, away from all of the stereotypical restrictions that there used to be in some of the earlier editions of D&D. Okay, now this is where we're going to talk a little bit about how this monster has evolved. We're going to look at the mechanical features of the Archdruid by edition. And for that, we're going to go ahead and we're going to switch over and take a look at a few sources that I have pulled up for us. All right. Okay. All right. Now, why are you being... Okay. You're being very annoying. Okay. There we go. You're being dumb. All right. Sometimes OBS just does not want to cooperate. All right. Going all the way back to AD&D. This is where we first learn about the Archdruid. Now, there was a druid class in the in original D&D, and they had this concept of a pyramid for druids at the higher levels, but they did not give them specific titles, except they said there was a nebulous sort of great druid, and I don't think they ever intended for PCs to actually achieve the rank of great druid in that other in that first edition or the original edition of D&D. Here in the here in AD&D, they have a whole pyramid where everybody who starts as a druid, they start as an aspirant and then an oviate, and then from levels 3 through 11, they are actually initiates. And these initiates are in circles. And there can be as many aspirants, oviates, and initiates as there are, PCs. You can have all of, the whole world could be populated by druids as far as they're concerned here. But when you get to 12th level, you start weaning out the number of people that are possible at each level. So at the 12th level of experience, you gain the title of Druid, and there can only be a total of 9 Druids in any one geographic area. Each Druid can have as many initiate followers as he or she wants, but there can only be 9 in that area. And when a PC rises to the 12th level of experience, they have to go find one of the druids and challenge that druid to hand-to-hand or magical combat. And if the PC defeats the druid, then they gain the title of the druid, and they are able to assume the title of druid. Now, if they fail, then they get kicked all the way down to just the bare minimum of experience for level 11. And they have to earn all the experience of level 11 over again. And when they reach enough experience to get level 12, they can go try challenging a druid again. And the same thing happens for the Archdruid, which is at 13th level, except instead of only 9, there are only 3 of the Archdruids. So when a druid reaches enough experience to get to level 13, they challenge one of the Archdruids. If they succeed, they become the Archdruid, or one of the 3 Archdruids. And if they fail, they get kicked all the way back down to just barely level 11, and they have to climb all the way up through level 11 again, challenge to become a druid again, climb all the way to level 13, and then challenge to be an archdruid again. So this is what they did to you in AD&D. And then this same concept carried over into 2nd edition as well. And 12th level, the druid acquires the official title of druid, and then when a 12th level character gains enough experience, they can become an archdruid. And again, there's only 9 druids in any one geographic area, so that you can think of that as like a continent or a large contingent of forests or a large mountain range or something like that. There can only be 9 druids or 9 people with druids, only 3 archdruids, and only 1 great druid in each area. Or I guess in 2nd edition, instead of calling them the Great Druid, they call them the Grand Druid. And then they introduce Hierophants, which is for higher levels. Now, I don't have all of the source books for 3rd edition or for 4th edition. And Wizards of the Coast published a boatload of source books for all of those editions. I mean, and even now, 5th edition, if you count all the hardback adventures and all of the source books that introduce different monsters and things like that, they're up to close to 30 source books in 5 years now already for 5th edition. So I don't own all of the books for 3rd and 4th. And in the books that I own, they do not refer to the Archdruid either as a monster or as a part of the hierarchy of the Druid playable class. So they may exist in 3rd and 4th in some form or another, but I don't, I don't have access to that. In 5th edition, the Archdruid has become an NPC. They classify it as a monster. You find it at the back, it's actually not in the back of the monster manual. It's as one of the NPCs that's in the back of Volos in 5th edition. And the Archdruid basically is just like those playable druids, with a couple of exceptions. The Archdruid is an 18th level spellcaster, so in those other two editions, it was 13th level. In 5th edition, it's an 18th level caster, a challenge rating of 12, and has obviously a whole ton of spell slots. All of the druid spells, everything from druidcraft and mending and produce flame as cantrips, all the way up to animal shapes and firestorm and foresight at the very highest levels. also has the basically fights with a scimitar, and has the change shape ability, because one of the cool things about druids in D&D in all editions is that they get the wild shape form. It's called wild shape in 5th edition. It's been called a couple of other things through the years. So the Archdruid NPC that your party might run into uh, has that ability to do that shape change twice a day. And that is a polymorph. And one of the things about a polymorph in D&D is that if you polymorph into another form and you take enough damage that would normally slay that form, you revert back to your original form with your full hit points, and any excess damage that was applied to the previous form gets applied to your normal form. So you can, with some of these, as you get to be a high level druid, you can basically double your hit points by wild shaping at the beginning of a fight and starting a fight in an animal form. And then when that animal takes enough damage to be lethal, you revert back to your real form. Okay, well, and now you can do all of your spell casting and everything like that and whatnot. So it can be kind of a useful trick for druids to be a lot more survivable in a fight, even if they are up against some really tough opponents. All right, so we're going to switch back to the slides now. All right, now thinking about Archdruids in encounters, how might you use an Archdruid in an encounter? Well, what I like to do, I don't like to deal with the any levels where the monster by itself would just be a deadly encounter, because there's no point in doing that. Starting in level 7, an Archdruid by itself is a hard and borderline deadly encounter for 5 characters of 7th level. If you want to have a hard encounter that's not quite going to be deadly, 5 characters of level 8 and 9 would find it a hard challenge by itself. Now, when it drops to a medium or an easy encounter, then I like to give you ideas about what you could add to the encounter to push it up to be a hard encounter. Not every encounter that you have to have isn't necessarily going to have to be a hard encounter, but just thinking, if you were going to make this monster kind of the linchpin of a hard encounter, what would you put around it if you have a level 10 party or a level 11 party? Now, by itself, the Archdruid is a medium encounter for levels 10 and 11. You can add 1 CR3, 1 CR4, or 2 CR2 creatures to the encounter to bring it up to a hard encounter. And the most likely kinds of creatures to add, based on the description of the Archdruid, would be beasts, plants, or fae. Now, there's also humanoids, but all of the humanoids that are in 3 or 4, they really don't fit with the milieu of what would make sense to have in an encounter with an Archdruid. So some of the things you might add to that encounter would be something like Allosaurus. So if your adventure is set in a place like Chult, where dinosaurs are living alongside with humans and things like that, well, you could have an Archdruid that is over an area where there's a bunch of dinosaurs, and maybe some of the dinosaurs are the beast, are either beast companions, or they watch out for the Archdruid's lair, something like that. Of course, you could have wakened trees, and then you might even have, if you're in some area like a desert area, your archdruid might have giant scorpions as animals that would be around and perhaps fighting alongside it. Now, if you are dealing with an evil druid, you get some of the low-level hags that start to come in around or around CR3, CR4. So, and hags being fey creatures, there could very well be, like if there was a twisted or dark or evil druid, might be in league with some kind of a hag somewhere along the way. So that could pose some rather interesting options for you if you're building your encounter. Now, in levels 12 to 16, an Archdruid by itself would be easy. And so, depending on the level of the party, I didn't want to break down every single level because, that's a little bit much to do. But in that range, you can add one additional CR12 at level 16 to make it a hard encounter, or at level 12 or at level 16 you can add up to 4 CR6 humanoid beasts, plants, or fey monsters. Some of the options, again, depending on where your archdruid is set and where your campaign is set. You could have mammoths. You could have the Koreds, which are these forest-dwelling, chaotic, very small humanoids. They're kind of like forest versions of goblins or something like that. They're just really chaotic, but they're not necessarily evil. They're sort of like imagine goblins that sort of answer to a nature spirit. That's kind of what they would be. You could have a T-Rex, again, if you're in a place like Chult. A conclave dryad would be an appropriate uh, uh, part of an encounter along with an archdruid. If you have an archdruid that is very closely connected with the Feywild, or if you encounter an archdruid in the Feywild, an autumn eladrin might be one of the other things. And then, of course, you could always encounter two archdruids in the encounter together, depending on what level the party is. And then, of course, for evil druids, there are a number of hags and some very powerful blight monsters that might work. Famously in adventures like Curse of Strahd, you have a great deal of evil blight creatures that are running around in Barovia and causing all sorts of havoc there and making life difficult for everybody that's just trying to get along. Okay, now where would you place an Archdruid in a campaign? Uh, I think it's probably best to have an Archdruid as either a really powerful potential ally or adversary for your party because you get into CR12. It may not be the ultimate boss, depending on how high level your campaign is scheduled to go, but they're probably going to be pretty high up the food chain and pretty significantly involved in whatever plot is going on. So if your campaign is telling a story that has the theme of civilization versus nature, or civilized people striving against the you know unbridled forces of nature, an archdruid might be somebody that is sort of in that milieu that could be a potential encounter, whether that be a friendly or a combat encounter with the party. So imagine if some evil force has sent nature amuck and the party is having to restore a balance. In that case, the Archdruid might be a major quest giver or kind of um, act as some sort of sage figure that would advise the party as to this or that course of action. Well, it seems like it seems like the trees are really upset about something. You should go over there and you should do whatever and talk to so and so because they can tell you all about what's going on with the trees. And or they have found out something. Oh well, this particular gift or this particular offering will appease the trees. Now to get it, you have to go to the other side of the forest and go into the cave system and slay the evil grumpkin that lives down in the bottom of the caves and bring the heart of that thing to the to the great tree in the middle of the forest, and then that will appease the trees. Yeah, whatever. On the other hand, you might be in a campaign where civilization has defiled nature and awakened some sort of powerful forces that are trying to restore an equilibrium. Now, the party may well start out as a foe of the Archdruid because they might be residents of this civilization and they might be trying to defend their homes. So they're starting out thinking that something evil is going on and go out there and then now they start to learn, oh wait a minute, this is not the forest attacking or this is not nature attacking the civilization. This is a response to civilization unwittingly attacking nature. So, depending on what their findings, they might become agents of helping the people of the civilization change their ways so they can find a more harmonious way to exist with nature, or depending on what your players want to do and depending on what kind of story there is and what the actual goals of the antagonist are, uh, they might wind up helping or trying to help civilization impose its will on nature itself. So that in that case, the Archdruid might start out as a foe and remain a foe. In the other case, the case we first talked about, they might start off as an adversary, but then the Archdruid might be sort of the sage that teaches the party, oh, here's the reason all this stuff is happening. And then in turn, the party might be able to go back to the leaders of the civilization and go, oh, hey, wait a minute. It looks like, whoopsie, we actually caused this because we did this and this and this, and that's not cool. And so then there could be several layers, several different ways that campaign could unfold, depending on what plot points you have written in there. All right, so what about reskinning an Archdruid? Well, an Archdruid is very particular. I mean, it's a humanoid that sort of acts as a voice of the spirits of nature. And it becomes the face and the voice of the spirits of nature for the PCs or for the civilization that the PCs are um, living in or adventuring for or protecting or whatever. So you could turn the druid into a even more of a personification of the nature itself, like making it an int. So just say that it is, a shepherd of the trees, but use the stat block of an archdruid instead of the int stat block. Um, Give it the abilities to sort of have all of the nature type things, and then you can flavor its shape change. Maybe instead of changing into animal forms, maybe it changes into other kind of plant forms. There's a bunch of different plant monsters in D&D, and so you could have the archdruid be able to take on the form of some of these other plant monsters if in fact you're turning it into an int or reskinning it as an int. And then you could go another way and have the druid, if the druid has responsibility over a certain type of animal or something, then as that druid gets more and more powerful, they actually begin to physically change and take on aspects of that animal that they are the guardian of, such as a centaur. So if they are the uh, if they are the druid that watches out over the mighty buffalo, well, they might have sort of, shaggy human head and torso and thick hair all over their arms and their chest and everything. And then they might have the body of a buffalo. This could be a really sort of interesting thing. You could go those ways with it, and I'm sure you could go a lot of other ways with it too. But because the Archdruid is so focused on being kind of an advocate of, or a representation of, or a force for nature, it feels difficult to sort of go away from that, especially since the druid spells are all kind of natural world, um, you know, type of spells. They all harness or imitate or use the force of nature as their power source. All right, I don't see any questions on the chat right now. I'm going to go ahead into the wrap up, and then I'll double check the chat again and see if anybody has any questions. All right. Once again, I have been DM Gallibond. On Sundays at 2 p.m., you can watch our Walker of Waterdeep show on my Twitch channel. That is our Planeswalking campaign. We have just finished up our time in Innistrad, and we are back for an interlude in Ravnica, where the party is going to basically debrief what they did, have a chance to talk with any of their guild contacts that they might want to deal with, work on some of their own things. It's kind of a downtime period, and then they will get briefed on the next phase of their journey, which will take them to a place that they don't yet know about. And then on Thursday nights at 8 p.m., we have our Sword Coast Chronicles game. And this is sort of the way that we are weaving our way in and out and around and through the various different published campaigns for D&D 5th edition. Right now, we are in the Tyranny of Dragons campaign, and they have just finished up the basically they've just reached level 4, so they have finished up looting the abandoned cave of the cultists. Which actually wasn't so abandoned. They actually went in there, got themselves captured by some of the leaders that stayed behind to help try to hatch the black dragon eggs, and then they had to be rescued by some of their allies. So they got through that. The cult leaders got away without being captured, and now they have made their way over to the city of Elturel, where they're meeting back up with Leosin, who is the monk that they met in Greenest, and with Onthar Froom, who is a paladin that some of the characters have as a tie-in with their backstory. So that is every Thursday night at 8 p.m., and those are both on my Twitch channel. On the YouTube channel, you can find all of the daily quick hit pieces that I do. So these usually range anywhere from 10 minutes to half an hour. Sometimes they go a little bit longer than that. And that includes all of the archives from Monster Monday, the recaps from the live sessions, and then a focus Arcane Wednesday, Divine Thursday, Lore Friday, Combat Saturday, and Skills on Sunday is what we do every week. We talk about those. And again, similar to with Monster Monday, we go back through the history of the game and see how these different things have evolved over time. And then also, I do have a Patreon. So if you really enjoy what we do here on either the Twitch channel or the YouTube, you want to support it, you want to make it possible for us to do more and invest more time and effort into it, then it would be great to have your patronage over there as encouragement for doing that. All right. I see no questions, so thank you all very much for being on the stream, and thank you for watching down the line. We will talk to you later, and remember to always watch out for the monsters under the bed. Good night, everybody.